Joining us now to discuss BTC price and more is CoinDesk Director of Professional Content, Galen Moore in Boston. Hello there, Galen. So you've had a chance to hear a bit of Chair Jerome Powell's announcement. There will be a doubling of that tapering effort. But what are your initial thoughts?
Anytime something like this comes out of the Fed, Christine, I tend to feel in this environment a little more bullish about Bitcoin in the long term. And the reason for that is I think, in this day and age, as sort of a post-Trump era, if you will, there is no separating a decision like this from politics. And you've seen, analysts looking at that how does this decision sit in the light of Jerome Powell's reappointment as chairman of the Fed? How does it sit in the light of inflation becoming a political hot button issue? And kind of, we've all seen the sort of during the Trump administration, the haranguing of the Fed over interest rates being too high at the time. That sort of perception of does politics intrude into monetary policy is a favorable narrative for Bitcoin as you think about a monetary policy in which politics cannot intrude.
Right. So is the Fed's hawkish stance already baked in, and that's why we saw a bit of a decline over the past few weeks, shall we say, and this relief rally? How long do you see that happening?
I think, first of all, in terms of what the Fed put out today, it's I think they met investors' expectations, largely speaking. You can see that in the equity markets reaction. I think to some extent you can see it in the crypto markets reaction as well today. Certainly some kind of a sense of a move to a more away from the maximum employment impetus would have been seen negatively, I think, by the market. And Chairman Powell stuck to that doctrine. And so that kind of consistency, I think, is viewed very positively and should be. In terms of how crypto markets are reacting, one thing I've been keeping an eye on is the not so much the price of Bitcoin, but actually the price of other crypto assets relative to Bitcoin. The rout for altcoins actually began a day earlier than it did for Bitcoin, and several days before the equities sell-off that opened the week. ETHUSD had a terrible day on December 9, dropping 7.5%. Some recovery over the weekend, but the sell-off resumed with the start of the week. And I think if you look at those like ETH BTC, Solana BTC markets, you can kind of get a sense of within the crypto markets, again, kind of independent of macro factors to some extent. What is the kind of the bullish sentiment? Bullish sentiment, I think, should be reflected in a shift toward altcoins and away from Bitcoin, and you can see that reflected in those altcoin prices relative to Bitcoin.
Right. Well, there are some projections out there on where FOMC members stand on raising rates, and it shows that the median of committee members are projecting 3 rate hikes next year, another 3 in 2023, and another 2 in 2024. How do you think that might impact the crypto markets?
I think we're sort of we have been for some time past the phase in which economic stimulus was this very sort of hot driving factor in the crypto markets, where you saw people with time on their hands and extra money in their bank accounts looking for ways to invest it. That said, the price levels attained by Bitcoin and other crypto assets as a result of that stimulus seem to be holding. If you look at what's happened in the sell-off this week, the price of Bitcoin is still somewhere near 50,000. I think, looking back to sort of the May 19 crash and sell-off at that time, which some might have thought of as a kind of a shift to a more bearish sentiment. I think there was a lot of people at that time that had confidence that we would get back to this price level, and here we are. I think it's hard to, again, it's not a question of like, is Bitcoin going to a certain number? It's a question of, well, what number could it possibly go back to? And I think it gets harder and harder to imagine a number in the low 5 figures and kind of the new norm is somewhere where we are today, or maybe a little bit below. And so the question is, I think for the long term, again, as those narratives about trust and governance and monetary supply and inflation take hold, what's the future for Bitcoin? I tend to think of it, regardless of what moves the Fed might make, I tend to think of it as a long-term investment in those narratives.
All right. Anything surprising that you came away with from Powell's announcement today?
No, and I mean that was good. I was sort of eyeing. I'll be honest, I was eyeing adding to my position in Coinbase stock this morning, and I was thinking, I'm going to wait and see if some curveball comes out of the Fed. I will say, if you kind of had that sort of trepidation as I did about pulling the trigger, and you see assets that have not yet rebounded. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think if you look around crypto, you can find a lot of things that have been pushed down but haven't yet come up relative to other crypto assets in the way that you might expect them to. So I'm not going to, make any picks or recommendations here, but I will say I think those opportunities are there.